And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Wednesday, and the countdown is firmly underway for the Springboks squad announcement, which will take place next week, Friday. Both the SAA and the Springboks squad will be announced next week, Friday. And until then, we've got to speculate about what we're going to see. And I'm hoping that people have now hastily had a chance to understand what the Springbok coach was sort of saying yesterday with the training squad. And I do think that there is a couple of surprises that could be in the works for that SAA squad. And I do think there are going to be opportunities for players to try and sort of play their way into a Bok team, for example, especially if we look at, the end of the last match against England, where we're not going to have English-based or France-based players, which will remove quite a few players from the sort of the team lineup. For example, with there be no English-based players, there will be, for example, no Jasper Wiese. We don't know if there's going to be a Dwayne Vermeulen. If there's no Dwayne Vermeulen, there's no Jasper Wiese, then all of a sudden there's a big opportunity for somebody like Evan Roos to potentially start at 8 against England. So, yeah, I do think that, whilst we are still sort of reacting to exactly what we think should be the squad and stuff like that, the training squad itself, when it is just a training squad, is a long way away from what the final squad could be and what the SAA squad could be. And if we go and look at that, squad, and I'm about to pull it up here. There's quite a few players who are not going to be involved, and that doesn't mean they can't be picked in the squad. For example, if France Day is not involved in the training squad, and yet will be very unlikely not to miss out, or to miss out rather, the final sort of 30-man squad. But the big sort of talk of the town really is who will don the number 10 jersey, because it has basically been confirmed that Andre Pollard will not feature in the end of year tour. It's also been confirmed that Elton Jantjies has not even been considered for the end of year tour because he's not playing any rugby at the moment. And as a result, there's a big opportunity for someone to sort of get themselves into that mix, because we need FLYHALF options. If Damien Willemse goes down, for example, at the moment it's probably going to be either Jan Goosen or Frans Steyn. But any sort of injuries that could happen, and for example, Jan Goosen, who is so injury prone, expected to play this weekend for the Bulls and get a set of game time up. If he goes down, for example, all of a sudden, I think there's a lot of opportunity for players to sort of find themselves in a Springbok side. And if for example if you look at an outside centre as a position, there's no depth there. And if Jesse Creel were to get injured and not be able to feature, suddenly the question is who plays outside centre, and it's going to be very interesting to see who gets named in the squad, because we need to try and find more outside centers, with the fact that Kanye Am's currently injured and JC Creel is our only real sort of option. And if you look in the squad that was actually named, the centers there were just two centers named, Ndame Delende and JC Creel. Now, yes, you can probably add you will add Andre Esterhuizen there in the final squad, because these are just SA based players and Japanese based players. But who else are we going to add? Are we going to be looking at a Raymond Ruler? Are we going to be looking at adding Dylan Lace to the squad? Does Hiccup and Vake, for example, have an opportunity to try and make that squad? If we get injuries, will we look to try and bring in somebody who's playing outside centre consistently, or do we look at moving David Lind from inside to outside, for example? So I think that there's a lot of things and answers, for example, answers that are going to be to questions during this end of year tour. But the big sort of buzz at the moment is who should play FLYHALF. And we've got a comment, we've got a poll going in the comments, and Martin Liebald does seem to be leading it quite strongly. But at this stage, I think the Boks are set to name 3 FLYHALF options in the final sort of 34-man squad, those being Damien Willemse, Jan Goosen, and Frans Steyn. It basically has been confirmed that Jan Goosen will form part of the final sort of Bok tour squad, because they said that he was within their sort of alignment camps and stuff like that earlier this year. He has kind of been within the Boks setup. He has been there, stuff like that. So he does know sort of what's going on and how they're playing and stuff. So he is aligned, and they're very big on their sort of alignment of the Boks sort of management. They're not very they prefer to blow the players who've been in part of the setup before bringing somebody else in from, um, out from the cold, because they've got a very specific game planning, a very specific way of doing things, and they prefer to back out. They prefer to back players within the system rather than bringing somebody and sort of throw them into the deep end, which is why we saw France staying being backed in the fly half position in the final test, supposed to bring somebody in and giving him a go. So unfortunately, I think for Martin Liebach, I'd be surprised if he does get named in that final sort of 34-man box squad, but he will be the SAA starting five. I think he has to be. I don't see how you can not be. I think that the way he's playing, for example, he's just kind of selecting himself, and the SAA squad, and they spoke about it yesterday, is very much an opportunity for people to sort of come in and make a difference and sort of put themselves within sort of the selection fold, and at the end of the day, if you look at the way our tour is set up, we've got our two biggest tests of the year in many ways are our first two tests. We go Ireland, France. We're not going to see any changes there, I don't think. I'll be very surprised. I think Ireland, France, we're going to see what we believe are our two strongest teams. And that for me will be Damien Williams at FLYHALF. And I don't think anything's going to change there. What becomes interesting, for example, is what happens after that, because there are two SAA games taking place, and then there's an Italian game. Now, in the Italy game, I do think it'll be a pretty strong side. I don't think we're going to go, oh, it's Italy, so therefore we can rotate a lot. But there is opportunity to rotate if you want to. And then we're going to have to rotate for the England game, because it's a case of what's what we're looking for? Oh, the England and top 14 players aren't. The France-based players are not available for that game. So there will have to be rotation in that final game against England. So I do think that there is a lot of opportunity for players, even in the SAA squad, to find their way into that final 23 for England, which is a very big test match at Twickenham. It doesn't get much bigger than playing a test match at Twickenham. So I'm going to be very interested to see how throughout the Autumn Nations series this team does develop, and whether we do start to see changes or whether we are very much going full team, best team, all four tests, and leaving the experimentation, for example, for the SAA. And even I think the SAA side are going to be quite an interesting mix of players, because I think that a lot of them are. It's going to be a mixture of players who are young and for the future, and senior players who are sort of coming back from injury and sort of coming back into the setup. I think France Steiner is going to feature in that SAA side. I think that they're trying to find a way to give him game time, but not necessarily in a Bok jersey. So I think that they will see him there. I don't know what sort of other players they're looking to try, how they're looking to bring back. I don't know. Kenan Moody's an example from the original box squad. So I mean, if you've got 34 people in the box squad, you'll probably see maybe 6 or 7 outside the test window. And frustrating, there's also actually URC action on that final weekend where we will not have our Springbok stars, which will obviously take a big toll on a lot of teams. It'll be likely to take a big toll on the Lions, who currently don't have any Springbok players within any sort of either squad. So I'm hoping that we might start to see a few Lions players popping up in that SAA squad. The likes of a Henko from Veek, maybe a Johnny Lombard, maybe a Ruben Venter, who knows, maybe a Franco Horn, who's playing some very nice rugby at the moment. But yeah, so just going through some of the comments. Chris Mooney, winner of the full touring squad, be announced. It's next week, Friday the 28th. 29th is actually the first Autumn Nations series game. I think it's Australia versus Wales. I'm just going to go to the Autumn Nations website. Nations series. We've got lots of big plans, by the way, for the Autumn Nations series. So yeah, you make sure that you subscribe to the channel and stuff like that and get involved, because I think it's going to be our biggest month yet as a channel, and hoping to really, really deliver you guys a quality experience. We want to make this your new number one go-to for all things Autumn Nations series. Leandro Bayer says, am I the only one who noticed that Sim saying Cheslin Colby is a very real option of FLYHALF? Yeah, I mean, they're saying that he is somebody that can play there. Again, I'd be very surprised to see them actually do it. It's one thing saying things. It's something very completely different actually doing it. So yeah, next week Saturday, it's Scotland versus Australia on the 29th of October. It's actually at the same time. Oh, it's not the same time as any of the South Africa matches, so that's pretty perfect. Yeah, because it is Lions versus Stormers. It's 4 o'clock, and so we'll go that match going into the Scotland versus Australia, and then Bulls versus Sharks on Sunday, 30th of October. So it's the two local derbies for the South African sides next weekend. It's pity that Bulls versus Sharks game couldn't happen on a Friday evening. You might actually have seen a couple of Springboks involved there, but we will see the SAA players still be involved in that round of URC rugby, and then they do have games on that weekend of the England test. So Stormers, Bulls, and Sharks will be without all their box for that weekend at the end of November. Because if you look at the alternation series, and it's absolutely stacked, by the way. I mean, the second week, for example, you've got Italy taking on Samoa, Scotland versus Fiji, but then the big boys come in with heat, by the way, and they do come in with heat. It's Wales versus New Zealand, followed by Ireland versus South Africa, France versus Australia, England versus Argentina on the Sunday. The next weekend, you've got the likes of Wales, Argentina, France, South Africa, Scotland, New Zealand. That third weekend, when we're playing against Italy, it's Argentina versus Scotland, it's England versus New Zealand, it's Ireland versus Australia. So there are some phenomenal games. And then that final weekend is just Wales versus Australia and England versus South Africa. So it is going to be non-stop chock-a-block rugby. And what's going to be very exciting is that we will be doing a video next week about how to watch the entire series with a VPN, and it's going to be very easy. It's going to be very affordable to watch all that action, which is going to be very cool. So Bradley Bay saying Miney Box should start with Willems at 15, backing Hendricks at 9. Quite said Chris Smith for me, he just suits the way the box play. No brainer, Miney also deserves a shout. Chris Booten saying anyone with the glass goose. Well, get used to the glass goose because he definitely is in the driving seat right now to be the backup to Damien Willemse. Bradley says that 10 Moy, 11 Mapimpi, 12 Damon Lindy, 13 from Vake, 14 Ches, and 15 Willemse. Chris Bar saying Rusty never speak too much politics, just tells the damn truth. Either you don't rate the guy and what he must do, come to the level. Project Consults couldn't pick it somewhere else, so if it's to play, then you don't give other players to be part of the alignment camps. Ahmed saying why the Flyers playing abroad are not considered. I mean, in theory they are considered. I mean, in theory, Rob de Preer could come back into the lineup. It is weird though. It's very few players. I mean, apart from the likes of Andre Esterhuizen, Jasper Wiese, maybe a Reynald Ulstad, very few players who were not involved with the box squad have actually come into the box squad from their performances overseas. Ches and Colby may have been one of them as well. But generally, the players who are involved in the box squad from overseas are players who were involved before they actually made their move. Your Franco Mostert, who's involved in the box squad before he went to Japan, Peter Steph-Toy, Malcolm Marks, Faf de Klerk, Damon Dale-Endy, all those sort of players who were already part of the box squad before they actually went over. Very few players who are applying their trade in Europe seem to actually manage to be able to get themselves back into a box squad. Based on their performance. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a case of they just don't get enough attention or they kind of get lost within the system. And that's what I do think. If you do want to make the move, you kind of just need to make into the squad first. You kind of need to be like sort of into the squad and then kind of make the move overseas. I think Tyron Green would have been a Springbok had he stayed here. I think that he would have been ahead of Kane Moody. I think he would have been ahead of Curtis Arendse. But I think there is a bias towards the African-based players. So whilst they said to him, no, going to the Harlequins won't mean you won't play for the Springboks, it has made it harder. I think there's no doubt that it has made it harder. And I do think that, as I said, I think if he had stayed, he probably would have been part of the box squad this year if he had put in the same form as he's putting in for the Harlequins for the Lions. Or even if he had made a move within. I mean, for example, somebody like Instuku Kunu has found his way into the box squad playing for the Sharks. I don't think he would have if he was playing for a European side. People talking about locks. Jay Van seems to be finding his feet over there in the top 14. will you be able to get into the box squad from the top 14? I don't know. Again, ideally, you want to be in a situation where you can, but I think it's also quite reassuring for the players who are committing to staying in South Africa, committing to play in South Africa, that you do tend to have one up on your European players in terms of getting into that box squad. That, you know, if you're going to go overseas, you're going to play a top 14 Premiership. If you want to play in the box squad, you're going to be bashing the door down. You're going to be one of the best players in that league to get into the box squad. Whether it's right or wrong is up for debate. You know, ideally we just want the best 23 players in the squad, or the best 23 players for the game time we want to try and play. But I think it is quite a nice reassurance for the players in South Africa that they do tend to be looked at before overseas players. And as a result, you know, I think it does encourage young players to try and commit themselves to staying in South Africa for as long as possible. You know, once they've established within the box setup and they move, they will still be part of the box setup. We haven't seen very few players being dropped for going overseas. But once if you're not in the actual squad, I think you find yourself very difficult. No player, I think I could safely say no player has made the box squad from playing in Japan. If they were not in there before. You know, so all your Japanese-based players were in the box squad before they made their move to Japan. Jesse Creel, Franco Master, Malcolm Marx, Faf de Klerk, Peter Steff the Toy, you know, Kwaka Smith. All these players were already involved in the box squad before they made their move to Japan. No one is going and saying, listen, JD Schickerling's playing really good rugby in Japan, he should be playing for the box. Because they just don't really rate the league. Rugby fan says, in on form, Goosen is one of the best players that we have produced. The question is, can he recover his form quickly after an ACL? I have my doubts. Chris Moonen says, why aren't there any Lions in the box squad? Yet, we're coming. Ahmed said, Reynard Alstad was an exception then. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So Reynard Alstad, Jasper Wiese, Andre Estes to a lesser extent because he did play for the box before, and he did play for the box under this management before. But Jasper Wiese and Reynard Alstad, Nicholas Janssen van Rensburg, for example, even Chesn Colby to a certain degree, those are players who were playing in, you know, sort of top 14 in the Premiership, who weren't really on the box radar and now back and now in the setup. But I would say Jasper Wiese is only the real success story, and maybe to a lesser extent Chesn Colby, just because Chesn Colby was playing really good rugby here. But Jasper Wiese wasn't really a feature when he was playing South African rugby. He went over to England. Now he's just putting in stormy performances, and he's now starting number 8. So I'd say he's probably the only player who really wasn't on the radar at all, went overseas to England, put himself on the radar, and has now settled into that box squad. Trying to think of any other examples, but none of them really sort of spring to mind yet. So yeah, again, it is just a lot easier to make the box squad if you are playing your rugby in South Africa itself. In terms of other news, we're set to see a Scotland squad being named today, and the big news is that it sounds like Finn Russell will not be named in the squad, which is quite a big call to make. We saw the Wales squad being announced yesterday. Lee Halfpenny's back, which is very cool. They have dropped Reece Kerr, and there's no Dan Biggar for the Autumn Nations, which is a big loss to Wales, and I do think that does make them a far weaker team. So yeah, we are starting to see a couple of selection calls this week. Very interested to see what the Scotland side will look like. Other sort of rugby news: Rico Awani has extended his New Zealand contract, but only for a year. He's only been extended until the end of 2023. So for me, that kind of sort of raised the red flag that I reckon that Rico Awani could be on the move to a European side or a Japanese club in 2024. I think the fact that they've only renewed him for 1 year and they always then try and renew them for a couple of years does mean that he is definitely looking at potentially a move away from New Zealand post World Cup, which, you know, a lot of players tend to do because from a financial perspective they kind of have to. And it sounds like Michael Hooper could be making his return for against Scotland next weekend, which would be very cool to see. I mean, he's such a cool player to watch when he's playing at his best. He's back within the Australian squad, and James Slipper was basically saying in his press conference he held today that it looks like he could feature against Scotland, which would be interesting to see if he takes the captaincy back. I don't think he will take the captaincy back now. It's already been named that it was James Slipper, but it will be interesting to see next year, for example, if Michael Hooper's back in the right sort of mindset and frame of mind. Does he take on the captaincy again, or is he just quite content with being Michael Hooper, one of the best, loose forwards, one of the best players in the world? I don't know. Have to wait and see. The Wallabies have got a very hectic end of year tour. They've got 5 tests. You know, they're playing more tests than anybody else. Because they're starting in Scotland in the first week, and then they are playing those 3 weeks as well as the 4 week and there's the extra week towards the end. So I mean, they're literally going Scotland, France, Italy, Ireland, Wales. I mean, it's a hell of a big test. I mean, they're basically playing mini Six Nations. You know, the only team they're not playing against is England. So it's a very cool tour for them, though, and they are saying that they're treating it as a bit of a trial run for the World Cup. And look, I think it is a pretty good trial run. New Zealand have got Wales, Ireland. Do they have Ireland? Actually, having said that, they've got Wales, England, and Scotland. They don't have Ireland, I was about to say. So there are some very cool autumn nations, fiction, stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of sort of where we're at. There are a couple of clips going on to Forever Rugby from the press conference yesterday. So Rashi Rasmus was sort of speaking on Sachin Ngomazulu, for example. He spoke a little bit about the women's rugby. He spoke about the FLYHALF situation, gave some context about selection and stuff like that. So it was quite a cool interview from him. So go check that out. The interview is on the channel, but we will be having clips and stuff like that onto Forever Rugby as well. Chris Midon saying, imagine Liebach, Esther Hayes, and Van Veek playing together for the SAA. Everything seems to be fine on my side from a microphone perspective, but yeah, let me know if you are having issues. Nothing's really changed in the last few weeks. So, Contender says for the first game versus Ireland, I'll play Willemse at 10, Stain at 15. Stain will kick for goal, and Willemse will find touch. Maybe second half, maybe some depth at 11 with Colby or Aronson shifting there. Well, we'll know how we're doing that in about 2 weeks' time. We will have our first bottle lineup actually 2 weeks today, Wednesday. Yeah, maybe even less than 2 weeks before our lineup against Ireland does get named. But yeah, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. We'll see you guys all tomorrow. And tomorrow we're going to be doing something cool. Tomorrow we're going to be, or Friday rather, maybe Friday, or even Monday. We're going to be doing a draft sort of SAA squad. We're going to be like trying to pick an SAA 23. It's going to be very fan-based, very engaging. We're going to be like, you know, voting on each basically, on each player, and sort of picking a final 23, which is going to be a lot of fun. So I'll see you guys then. But until then, do smash like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. And I'll see you guys all very soon. Until then, keep well.